All right, Crim 5, Chapter 6, Relations within the Police Organization. So this chapter, we're going to talk a lot about the actual organization within a police department. Again, probably more or less something that you're kind of familiar with. But let's move along here. The police organization is a conglomerate of many individuals and groups that cooperate in varying degrees. So clearly, within a police organization, you don't just have your line staff police officers. And how well that agency functions as a whole really kind of depends on how well they work together. The vast majority of police agencies are very militaristic. They are kind of, the organizational chart looks like a kind of a triangle. It's very kind of pointy at the top, and it gets like a triangle. Figure 6.1 is on page 109. Oh, no, it's not, actually. 6.1, well, that's actually on page 107, but kind of an organizational chart is on page 109 of your book, and it kind of lays out kind of what it looks like. You have a chief at the top and a lot of line staff at the bottom. So it kind of looks like a triangle where you have just a few at the top and a lot, excuse me, at the bottom. So why is that? There's a hierarchy. There is an order. There is a chain of command that is really important in a police agency. And really, honestly, there has to be someone in charge. And when it's a life or death type of situations, there has to be someone making decisions, making quick decisions, making fast decisions, making good decisions. And there has to be someone who is articulating those decisions to others in a very clear and decisive manner. Now, does that always happen? Not necessarily. An effective leader is very good at communicating. Are all leaders effective communicators? No. Which means not all leaders are good leaders. You all have probably had a job before where you have had a crappy boss. And a lot of times, a lot of that comes down to that person is not a good communicator. Or they just treat you like crap. Anyways, that's a whole other story. But good communication is really an important skill for a leader, and certainly in, again, a life or death situation like law enforcement. In a police agency, typically, when, again, chain of command is really important. So if you are a line staff police officer, you are an officer out on the beat, out on patrol, and you have an issue, you're going to take that issue to your immediate supervisor, okay, who's going to be, let's say, your sergeant. You're not going to take that issue that you have straight up to the chief, who is the top dog in your chain of command. It's always going to go to your immediate supervisor. That's the way the chain of command works. It's called a chain because the links kind of all hold together, right? So think of how a chain works and how the chains link together. That's how the chain of command works. Now, if your problem, if you're line staff, you're a street cop, and your problem is with your supervisor, then you're going to go to his immediate supervisor. Again, you're still not going to jump all the way to the chief. But having those chain of command, having the chain of command in place is there for a reason. And I would tell you a very long, boring story, but as a probation officer, we did the same thing. And I broke that chain of command and went straight from line staff. I was line staff, and I went straight to the chief with an issue. And yeah, I got in a lot of trouble. I would do it again. It was the right thing to do, but I'd been there for a long time, and I knew that I wasn't going to get fired or anything, and I knew it was the right thing to do, so I did it. But typically, I would not recommend. Don't go out the chain of command, especially if you're new. And you're not sure that you're not going to get fired. I knew I wasn't going to get fired. I'd been there a long time, and I knew the players involved. But anyways, chain of command. Chain of command. Let's see. What else? Chain of command should be responsive. And the chain of command, that information that flows upward from you to your boss, it also, that same chain of command comes down to you. So the information that you get, it comes from the chief, you should get it from your direct supervisor. So that chain of command is supposed to be where that free-flowing information comes from. So you get information and you give information. Your point of contact is your direct supervisor. Again, the structure looks like kind of like a pyramid. And the ultimate goal is for everybody who's involved with that agency, whatever department you work for, to follow whatever the mission statement of that agency is. There are agencies that have 5 officers, and there are agencies that have 500 officers, 1,000 officers. So my dog is making weird noises. So if you hear some kind of weird noises on the recording, he's right next to me and he's like growling and doing weird stuff. So that's not me. It's my weird dog. So anyways, small agencies, the chain of command and the whole vibe of the agency is different. In some agencies, you might be a police officer who's never met the chief before because the agency is so big. In other agencies, the chief might be out patrolling the streets with you because the agency is so small. So you have to understand the structure of your agency and take that into account when you are performing your duties within that agency. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. I worked for the Madera Police Department as a dispatcher for about a year, a long time ago. Very small agency. The chief came in every day. Everybody knew him. So it was I don't know how many officers we had, maybe 20, something like that. And then I've also been lucky enough to work with some officers. My partner was from the Fresno Police Department. And I don't know, every day we would see another officer and I'd say, hey, you know that guy? And he'd be like, I've never seen that guy before. And he was a coworker. So Fresno PD was huge. So there would be, times when we'd see people he'd never even seen before. So the different sizes of the agencies definitely has a lot to do with how the agency works. Most important operations unit is the patrol unit within every agency. Police officers don't just patrol, but they're typically the first line of defense. They are responsible for crime control, order maintenance, and service delivery. You also have things like your traffic. You also have detectives. You have ICE. You have SWAT. So there's a bunch of other operations in addition to just your patrol. But patrol, they're the ones that are out there on the streets being seen by the community on a daily basis. Administration. Now this is once you start getting promoted and you work your way up the charts and work your way up the food chain and you start getting promoted, you become admin. Now these are the people that are basically making the decisions. They're responsible for personnel, training, hiring, making decisions, transferring people, demoting, disciplining, rewarding. And they're basically the ones that are deciding how the department is being run. A lot of times, and this is maybe just my opinion, but a lot of times administrators are the ones that haven't been on the streets in a while. They haven't been in the communities because they've been kind of maybe sitting behind a desk for a while. So a lot of times people would say that they sometimes get out of touch. But these are going to be your supervisors. They're the ones that are deciding how you do your job every day. The chief, the deputy chief, lieutenants, captains, things like that, those are going to be more of your administrators. Auxiliary services are going to be people who are typically non-sworn. So they're going to provide other services like dispatch, community service officers, clerical, things like that. And like I was saying, communications is the most important auxiliary service. When I worked for the Madera Police Department, I think I said I was a dispatcher, but I was a dispatcher, so that would have been auxiliary service. That was probably the worst job I've ever had in my life. It was, and I would say that because it was ridiculously stressful. I got paid very little. I made more money bartending, so I quit that job while I was in grad school, and I went back to bartending, and I made more money bartending at Red Robin than I did as a full-time dispatcher. So super stressful job. But I learned a lot, so I'm glad I did it, but really stressful job. Blah, blah, blah. There are other auxiliary units. The informal, this is referring to kind of more the, not shady, not backdoor, but the, I would say, people who work within the department who have knowledge of how to get things done, maybe in a more rapid manner. Let me just read what the book says. Networks that expedite agency performance by permitting individuals to utilize their political skills to interrelate with one another in order to better accomplish their respective tasks. So not necessarily saying that people are being shady, but maybe they're using their own kind of their political pull to get things done, maybe in an informal way. But it does not say, we're not talking about shady stuff, though. We're talking about maybe some political pull they might have in order to get some things done. Okay. Individuals assigned to perform specific police tasks are line staff or line personnel. Individuals assigned to facilitate the performance of police tasks, these are non-sworn, are going to be support staff. Okay, so if you are a sworn person, you are an officer, you are able to make arrests. If you are a non-sworn or civilian, you are not able to make arrests. Okay, so these two right here are referring to officers, and these two are referring to people who are not officers. Okay. Interunit competition. Okay, there are different units within every agency. Let's say there's a campus unit, for example. I worked with the campus police officers within the Fresno Police Department. There's a vice unit. There's a gang unit. There's a career CCAT, career criminal auto theft. There's a homicide unit. There's a bunch of different units that work within the department. Their rivalry should be a good thing. They should say, you know, oh, we arrested more people than you. Ha ha, we're going to get you. Ha, you know, it should be a great thing. Unfortunately, a lot of times it becomes a negative thing, an us versus them kind of thing. Well, how come they get better cars than we do? How come their caseloads are smaller than ours? You know, things like that. So that's kind of one thing to consider within the agency that might cause, you know, some issues with the officers. How come so and so got promoted or got moved to that unit? I want to be on that unit because they do less work, and that happens very frequently. You then have collective bargaining and police unions. I kind of touched on them unions a little bit in the last chapter, but unions, to me, I personally describe unions as a necessary evil. I have been an armed peace officer for, I was an armed peace officer for 20 years. The day that I was hired as a peace officer, an armed peace officer, I joined the union. I don't necessarily like a lot of things about unions, but if I was going to have a gun on my hip, I was going to make sure that the union would be there to represent me if I had to shoot somebody. So, and I know that kind of sounds bleak and kind of depressing, but I as an armed peace officer, I believe that most people should, and again, this is my opinion, if you are going to be an armed peace officer, you probably should be a member of a union, because legal fees can definitely financially ruin you if you were to get involved in a shooting or another type of incident, and just legal representation alone. Police unions will cover you. But anyways, police unions also do fight for your salaries and working conditions and things like that. Negatives to me, they get involved in political stuff that whether you agree with it or not. So anyways, but those are definitely things that, and sometimes those are things that can get between officers. Managing change. No one likes change, okay? No one. None of us likes change. And we've certainly learned that lesson a million times over the past, I don't know how many months. But it's vital. We have to change. And again, that's another lesson that we've had to learn. Implementing change within a police organization is almost more difficult than anywhere else. And trying to figure out how to do so within a police agency it's very challenging. The key to managing change is to making sure everybody understands why the change has to happen, what the effects might be, and how the change is going to occur. And having a good manager or administrator, making sure that they can be there to support the staff and the officers during the change is important. Dealing with superiors. Again, most of you probably had a job before, and if you have, you've probably had a boss before that was either great or horrible. Management styles of police executives vary considerably due to work assignments, experience, education, training, individual personality, and policy requirements. The key to understanding each style is how the police leader orient themselves to the internal and external communities. With probation, I remember one of the assignments I was in the same assignment for about 6 or 7 years. In that time, I had 6 different managers. It wasn't me getting moved around. All my managers, one got promoted, one moved away, anyways, I had that many different bosses, and trying to adjust to the different personality styles of each different boss, it can be frustrating. It can get, it's not fun. Getting a new boss 6 times or once a year is not fun. And you kind of have to just adjust accordingly and hope and pray that your boss isn't going to be one that nitpicks you or that is not supportive. So it's tough. Immediate superiors. Successful officers have to establish a working rapport with their supervisors. Most disagreements with superiors can be mitigated through understanding and compromise. And like I said before, probably the number one key to a good supervisor, manager, administrator, communication. Communication, communication, communication. Dealing with subordinates, and then this is kind of a little breakdown of, if you are a supervisor, what types of employees you might have to deal with. You have a newbie or a rookie. They don't know what they're doing, so you might have some competency issues. Some employees do very well, and they don't need a lot of supervision. They take care of business, and they require minimal monitoring. Those are going to be your favorites, probably. You're going to have your rock stars or your stars who are great workers, but they have big ego issues. You're going to have your cynics who think they've been wronged and are always going to feel like they deserve better. You're going to have your people who are getting ready to retire and they basically have one foot out the door and really don't care anymore. Or then you have your depleted or burned out employee, and those are a lot like your retirees who basically just don't care anymore. And it gets pretty sad. So you got to consider that when you are a supervisor, you're also dealing with quite a different, vast array of different types of employees. So in dealing with peers, when you get to work, you got to realize what kind of people you are working with as well. Some people are going to be there no matter what. They're going to be by your side. They're going to be there to help you. They're going to be there no matter what. Others are always going to be suspicious and think that you are only there because you want something from them. And then you're going to have those that you've never really had anything good or bad to say about. One of the quickest ways to alienate an employee is to claim credit for their accomplishments. I had a boss who used to do that all the time. And it wasn't just me, it was pretty much any one of us. He'd ask for ideas, we'd give him ideas, and then he'd go to the boss and tell everybody that it was his idea. So don't do that. Nobody likes that. Sharing glory for an accomplishment is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Despite the best intentions and efforts, things are going to go wrong. I think we all know that. I hope you all know that by now. If you're in college, you have probably gotten that life lesson behind you by now. Sometimes shit happens. So pick yourself up, move forward. That's all you can do. A good officer will not only be quick to identify and correct improper performance, but will also be willing to accept responsibility for his or her own failures. That's it.